say what this referral is not. It is not a duplication or a replication of the ordinance in San Francisco that was rejected by the Ninth Circuit on appeal. We've taken great pains to ensure that the language that we have recommended is language that is legally passes muster, and that it does not fall victim to the language problems that were involved in the San Francisco ordinance. Let me also reiterate that the legal costs associated with this on appeal would be borne pro bono by one of the most outstanding lawyers in this country, who is Lawrence Lessig of the Harvard Law School, where he's a professor, and is chair of the Edmund J. Safra Center for Ethics. I think ethics is a key word here. We have an ethical responsibility and a legal one to protect the health and safety of people by offering them the best opportunities they can have to see what decisions to make regarding cell phone usage. Now, despite Mr. Keegan's arguments to the contrary, the FCC has indicated very strongly that they want every cell phone manufacturer to put readable, understandable, conspicuous language in the manuals, online, and in the cell phone devices themselves. I have an iPhone. You have to go 5 pages deep into the iPhone in print that's very small, and you know an iPhone is renowned for having enabling you to enlarge the print. You can't enlarge that print. They made it special just for us so that we can't enlarge the print. On another aspect of this, I have a tape of Mr. Dane, I forget his last name. Pardon me? Yes, Dane Snowden, who testified before the Senate, the state Senate in 2011. He said unequivocally that the cell phone industry, no manufacturer has ever and will never say a cell phone is safe. That's his quote. So for Mr. Keegan to get up before us and claim unequivocally that cell phones are safe and they pose no threat, that's another matter. You know, he'll have to deal with his own conscience on that. But our item here does not speak to those issues, only lifts the language that the FCC imposed on the manufacturers. So they said, yeah, we'll comply, but try to find it. So we've said, look, we have an ethical responsibility to ensure that the language is brought up in a fashion where people can actually read it and understand it and apply it to the usage of the phone. That was the intent of the FCC, and even though they are not the most leading and progressive and rigorously testing these phones throughout the world, the FCC does have standards. And those standards, although they need to be improved, are there for anybody to see if they have a magnifying glass. So we want to be the magnifying glass for the consumers. We want to lift that language from obscurity, and from small print to legible, understandable, readable information. Now, what was handed out before, just a while ago, without consultation with me, who have been working on this for 3 or 4 years, had flaws in it. And I think Lloyd indicated that those flaws could be fatal, in a sense. Speak to the science that underlies this. But all we're saying is, look, you have a right to information, and we have a responsibility to provide it. And if we shirk that responsibility, we're not doing ourselves or the public a service. We're, in fact, doing a disservice to people, because the information is there. We've lifted it because it was compelled. These manufacturers would never even put the language in there if they hadn't been compelled to do it. And since they were compelled, they drove their feet, they half-stepped, and they came up with something that is not in a form that consumers can ingest it and understand it and apply it. There may be people who worry about various aspects of this, but the biggest worry is that the unsafe use of these devices will lead to harm to the public. And the FCC and the Congress also agree with that, because they're the ones who compel the language. And minimal as it is, obscure as it is, we still have a responsibility if we're going to protect the public. We just had a magnificent victory with Measure D. And it was an effort that was broad and deep and reached into the depths of this city and its conscious and its awareness about health issues. And if we don't apply what we know through the precautionary principles and through common sense and the science that we have before us, to give the public a fighting chance when they're consuming these. There are more cell phones now than there are people in this country. That wasn't the case 3 years ago. It certainly wasn't the case 15 years ago. 3 years ago, Councilmember Capitelli, when we were discussing this, the issue, brought to us a iPhone box. I was just reviewing the streaming video this afternoon. He held up the box and he said, look, I've looked at the manual, I've looked on the box, and there are no warnings on it. He's turned the box upside down and said, there's a website on the bottom where you can go to if you want some information about this. If this is not deliberate obfuscation and obscurity, then I don't know what is. Yes, you complied with the FCC law, but you didn't do it in a conscientious and forthright manner that was designed to protect the public. So I'm moving this item, and I hope the council will endorse it and accept it and refer this to the city manager for language that we can include in the sale of these cell phones at the retail level so that people have the information they need to make prudent and wise decisions.
What is the language you're talking about? Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Okay, could you explain what the language is? I'm sorry. You didn't, you said refer to the manager.
The language, the proposed wording is the federal government requires that cell phones meet radio frequency exposure guidelines. Don't carry or use your phone in pants or shirt pockets or tucked into a bra when the phone is on and connected to a wireless network. This will prevent exposures to RF levels that may exceed the federal guidelines. Federal guidelines.
Okay. I just want to know what the language was.